because I think that there are some stereotypes that the left has kind of bought into about what the arguments are on the other side. And, it doesn't make us sharper to misrepresent what the other side is actually saying. It
Hmm.
actually makes us weaker. It is what it is. And they can get as offended as they want, they can get as upset as they want. I don't really care. I'm not a mouthpiece for anyone, any political party, any political group. My obligation is to share the facts of the story with my audience to the best of my ability, and then do good faith analysis on those stories. And if they don't like my analysis, they can make whatever decision they want about whether they support or watch the show. One of the things that Jesse Singles says all the time that I love, and he says it repeatedly, is it's complicated, because it is. Like, all of these issues are way more complicated than the way they're being portrayed in partisan media. And so what I want to do is actually understand those complexities. But here's the other thing: understand the other side in good faith. Okay. Because I think that there are some stereotypes that the left has kind of bought into about what the arguments are on the other side. And, it doesn't make us sharper to misrepresent what the other side is actually saying. It
Hmm.
actually makes us weaker. If you understand what their arguments are, it'll then allow you to reflect on what your own weaknesses might be in regard to the arguments that you're making. And
Right.
so, and then one other thing, and this was an unexpected outcome that I was talking to my husband about just last night. I've been a lot happier lately, like a lot happier. And
Yeah.
I think it's because once you actually, and look, I want to make the distinction and like draw out a caveat. I'm not talking about like far right, like militia members. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about just mainstream conservatives, Republicans, whatever. Once you actually understand what their arguments are or where they're coming from, it's a lot more difficult to be hyperbolic about things,
Yeah.
right? And so you kind of start seeing the world around you for what it really is. And there's a certain amount of fear that kind of starts to dissipate, a certain amount of like hyperbolic thinking that starts to go away. And you start to see things a lot more clearly. And the world isn't as messed up as people would have you believe. And that's a good thing. Now, some
Yeah.
people
Hmm.
might get super offended at me saying that because they've completely bought into the hyperbolic thinking and they think the world's coming to an end. And there are terrible things happening. I don't want to minimize that, but
Right.
we need to be realistic about what's actually transpiring in the country. And for areas where we need improvement or different policy solutions, we should actually have good faith debates about it and come up with those solutions. And I think that the current discourse is standing in the way of that.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's that's
we
really fast. I never thought about that but it makes perfect sense if, people go into politics when they have this very like the other side is either composed of like all racists who want to enable, some kind of fascistic regime against me,
Right.
or like
Yeah.
the other side is all made of like, communists who want to take over the country. Like it's gonna put you in this headspace. You're like, oh my God, like I'm in this fight for my life. Like this is like the most important thing ever. And then you're like, well, once you start to see like, well, yeah, there's small pockets of that exist, but the average person is not that. You're like, oh my God, this weight has been lifted from my shoulder. I don't feel like the world is about to end.
yeah,
Yeah, totally.
I want to say two things. First of all, and I don't know your take on Jordan Peterson, but it is like the first rule is tell the truth, and I feel like coming to a place in your life where you're like, I feel like I'm honestly telling the truth now. I can see where that would make me feel completely better. I'm one of these people who just hates thinking I'm being dishonest, or if I'm in a position where I'm forced to be dishonest for a job or something like that. I
Hmm.
just, oh, it's horrifying for me. So, and I do think it is kind of politically expedient for a lot of people to categorize far right, racist, Nazi pieces of shit who, none of us are in favor of, for moderate Republicans who just want some,
Hmm.
they have a different spin on some sort of policy prescription, which my thinking of the world is, you've got the conservatives on the right who are kind of playing defense for society, and you have liberals and progressives on the right who are kind of, or on the left, who are kind of playing offense for society. They're the ones that are pitching all of these crazy policies for making society better. And conservatives are kind of saying, well, we're kind of good where we are now. Should we take the risk of doing this? And you really need, I mean, what sports team that doesn't have a good offense and a good defense is going to be a winning team? So a lot of the political polarization I see as part of the problem here. And one of the nice things about you starting to realize, you know, there are people on the right that aren't just crazy, insane racists, and maybe you can communicate their arguments clearly to your audience, which is a great position to be in. We might be able to deal with some of the political polarization.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are, look, I disagree with many of the policy ideas they have or the perspectives they espouse, but there are good faith, thoughtful, conservative Republicans out there. Like, I think Glenn Loury is a good example. You know, again, I might not agree with everything he has to say, but he's a thoughtful person, and he is not in any way justifying, you know, white supremacy or some of the like hyperbolic things that he might get accused of by those on the left. And again, it's really about understanding in good faith the other side and being able to, I guess, debate the issues as opposed to, like, what I see happening right now is I want the left to engage in the argument as opposed to what I see happening, which is them engaging in like ad hominem in a lot of cases, character assassination, or like statements about the individual's character based on their preconceived notions and based on what they heard other streamers say about the individual. It's like, okay, just take a step back for a second. You need to address the point that this person is making. And if you're not addressing the point that this person is making, and instead you're turning around and throwing all sorts of like accusations at them to make them seem like they're immoral or they're bad people, then that tells me that you don't really have an answer to what they're saying, you know? And I see that happening more when it comes to culture war related issues as opposed to economic issues. And that's the other thing. I mean, I think that the left has completely, and they'll deny this, but I mean, just go to Twitter right now. They've like abandoned economic policies and instead hyper focused on incredibly divisive, like identity related issues, right?
Yeah.
And yeah. And like their take is always, oh, well, the other side wants us they're racist. That's why. They're transphobic. That's why. And it's like, no, you got to do more than that. So if you're going to, if you're going to refute what they're saying, then actually address the points they're making. And if you're not going to do that, you're going to come out looking incredibly weak and childish.
You probably don't know this, but we talk about MMT and UBI on the stream quite often. And it drives people crazy. I mean, how do you make affordable housing sexy? It's like, it's not necessarily a thing.
Well, I mean, it's surprising because I did a story just last Wednesday on Airbnb crashing. And,
I watched that vid. Yeah.
Yeah. And that video, I'm kind of shocked. It got like 200,000 views. It was not something I expected. I thought like, oh, it's a dense, like statistics driven, video, but it did well. And I think that there is a hunger for those types of videos and for that type of content. It's not going to go super viral like some hyperbolic, video about like a police shooting or about an alleged Karen, right? But I don't really care. Like I just, look, I don't want to be part of the problem. I don't want to add to this toxic discourse that does nothing to improve anyone's life. And I feel like I've been engaging in that and I feel embarrassed about it. And that's really where I'm coming from. I want to get people healthcare. I want to get people housing. Those are the issues that matter. Okay.
Well, in order to do that, you kind of have to work with Republicans, and that's where I think this stereotype of Republicans as evil racists is ultimately not helpful in the end. If you want health care, you can't work with the evil racists to get health care done. You just can't do it.
Well, I mean, it's hilarious because, okay, let's put healthcare aside for a second, because here's the other thing. The far left will push ideas that are not popular with the general public, right?
Yes.
So I think that protecting, marginalized communities, protecting the transgender community is important. However, when you move out of or move far away from making sure that they are not denied housing, making sure that they're not denied healthcare. When you move into like these more fringe areas of like, I mean, there was a story out of the UK this week, blows my mind. There was an LGBTQ group in the UK who suggested that instead of referring to vaginas as vaginas because it might be offensive to transgender men, one of the potential replacements or substitutes could be bonus hole.
Oh no.
Bonus hole?
Yeah, bonus hole. And
Oh no.
listen, people don't like this stuff, okay? They might not be on Twitter talking about how much they dislike this stuff, but on average, every normie woman I've talked to is like, I can't stand this stuff, right? So what Jake and I recently talked about it. I think we talked about it in the context of, trans athletes or whatever. And it was, hey, we got to be a little more strategic because if you do this, if you start pushing the mainstream Democratic Party to run their campaigns on these like fringe issues, they might not get reelected or they might not get elected at all if they're running against a Republican in a district. And the response, and it's the same response we got when we made the same point about the stupid prison abolition movement, is we don't care. We don't care. This is the right thing to do. We don't care. And it's like, well, okay. But then you complain about what Republicans are doing in various red states. So do you want more Republicans to get elected? And do you want more of these, look, I think that some of these laws that have been passed in various red states, for instance, banning gender affirming care for adults, between the ages of 18 to 25, I think that's wrong. I think adults should be able to make a decision about their own bodies. I do think that there is a worthwhile debate when it comes to, hormone blockers and cross-sex hormones for children, and we should have that debate in good faith. But I don't want the pendulum to swing far to the right. I would venture to say the left feels the same way, except I'm not so sure. Because to them, going on Twitter and patting themselves on the back for being the most pure is more important to them than strategy. It's more important to them than actually accomplishing the policies that they claim to want to accomplish. Every time I make that point, they'll be like, oh, but you don't even know. There are people on the ground, activists on the ground, working hard to make this happen. And it's like, I mean, I'm not blind. I see what's happening in the country right now. So you can tell me about, your imaginary on the ground activists making real change happen as we speak, but I'm not buying it. So it is what it is. And they can get as offended as they want. They can get as upset as they want. I don't really care. I'm not a mouthpiece for anyone, any political party, any political group. My obligation is to share the facts of the story with my audience to the best of my ability, and then do good faith analysis on those stories. And if they don't like my analysis, they can make whatever decision they want about whether they support or watch the show. And that's why I say I might be engaging in a little bit of self-sabotage, because I don't know what the outcome of all of this is going to be. There is no big play here. I'm not leaving TYT. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I don't know what the outcome will eventually be, to be honest.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.